So basically, the thing about, I mean, I'm sure people, well, possibly DZ doesn't do a lot of this, but I always had to do a lot of singing in lessons in my undergrad and stuff. And it's somewhat helpful for pitch, but I found that you kind of just go like, and you can just follow the piano along the way they do it. So the way that I got taught is you take the starting pitch and then you check yourself. So and so you're singing first and then just using the piano to check what you're doing.
Right.
So do you mind trying to do a little bit of that with maybe this first phrase?
Sure.
So. We'll just do pitch by pitch at first. Cool. And then one more time, just so we'll try to do it in kind of slower than. Or what tempo are you actually doing? Okay, so maybe a little bit slower than 1, 2, 3. Sorry. I'll check. And then the other thing, I mean, this is good for checking pitches as you go in music like this. The way that it's kind of, I've been able to use it as far as getting a better sense about pitch in general is to do solfege with it. And you guys use numbers instead of solfege. Yeah. Okay, so in solfege, starting on C, it's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Sorry, that pitch was terrible. So this is kind of another teacher gave me this idea, but if you just do fixed do, where C is always do, and C sharp is do, and C flat is do, it doesn't exactly give you, in my undergrad, we had to sing like do, and then if it was sharp, it was D, and if it was flat, it was day, and you spend all your time thinking about syllables.
Right.
So this just gives you something to have in your head that sort of like when you hear this pitch, in something in this range, you start to think do, you start to think C, and you start to remember it. So when you come onto it, you come to another A, you'll think la. So. I mean, that gives you a little bit more of a sort of absolute sense of where pitch is once you get good at it. So I guess how I would go about practicing it is just you know, I don't know, because you guys haven't used solfege a lot, it might be helpful to write some stuff in, at least at first. But if I were gonna do something like this, it'd be sol, la, ti, re, do, si, fa, mi, fa, la, sol, mi, re, la, re. So that you kind of, you know, that makes sense. So it kind of stays with what you're going.
So the accidental doesn't change the syllable you use at all? Okay.
No, and I mean, you could, I think if you could easily remember all 12 different syllables that you're using for all those things, or however many they would end up being, I think it would make sense to use that. But I found that if I try to use the altered syllables, I spend all my time thinking about what syllable it is rather than just thinking about the thing. So we could try practicing some of that. Maybe some of the stuff where it's a little bit more.
Scale.
Yeah. Do you want to try maybe by yourself doing it without syllables at first? Just checking yourself with the piano.
Sure.
And then we can try to add some of the syllable stuff starting on the quantissimo.
Can I have the first note?
Do you want to try doing the piano stuff as well? Sort of to practice working on that.
Sure.
Nice. You do a little bit of correction down. Yeah, and so you start to you have to be able to actually figure out an accurate pitch rather than just a ballpark when you do it that way. So I find that really helpful.
Yeah.
So then for syllables, I mean, I know that you haven't done this a lot, but would you be able to figure this out on your own if you would?
So the first one is so.
Yeah.
So fa do.
It's so la.
So la.
Yeah.
So la. So la do mi la.
Ti la.
Ti la.
And then mi. And that's okay. This isn't stuff that you've done a lot of before, and it takes a while to have it be.
Yeah, I've never used solfege.
Yeah. Let me see if I can get a little scrap paper. Do you have pencil by any chance?
I do. It's Brenden's, but I have one.
So it's bass clef is I imagine the easiest for you.
Either or.
Okay.
Saxophone.
I'll just do bass clef because it's easier for me. All right. So. So, do, re, mi, fa, so, la, ti, do. So for like this, then you can write out a little bit and start doing some syllables so you don't have to think about them all on the spot.
Is it strange that the school uses numbers?
I mean, everywhere else I've been has used solfege stuff. I mean, it kind of makes sense, and I guess you kind of, it makes immediate sense intuitively where, like, for scale degrees, particularly if you're doing it in a key, if you're thinking in B flat, 1, 3, 5, that matches up with theory and stuff like that. But it seems like it's a little more cumbersome to sing. And then when you get into the atonal stuff, Alex was telling me that they do, like, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that seems like having a different set of numbers that corresponds to the same group of pitches would just make it impossible to get fluent with, which is the nice thing about do, la, fa. So, like, this way you just start to, I mean, this is always la, and this is la, and it's a little unusual. I think I can kind of see why they do it, but. Good at writing out music.
This one.
We'll just do that much. Okay, so we've got, let's figure these out together. So we start on so.
Right. So, la,
Mhm.
do, ti, la, re, no, mi. Mi, la, mi.
So
Well, I
we
mean,
just
it's
hang on to
tied,
that.
yeah.
So we just hang on to that. And then
So it's
me, and then
re, mi, so,
Mhm.
fa,
Mhm.
re, do,
Okay.
so, fa.
Sorry, I got a little ahead of you.
Do.
And then do. All right. So this doesn't have to be at any sort of tempo, but I'll try from the beginning with the syllables. Okay.
So, la, do, ti, la, mi, re, mi, so, fa, re, do, fa, do.
Yeah. So that kind of makes sense as far as what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just something where whenever, particularly if I'm learning new music, I'll sit down and do kind of, I might take a phrase this long and figure out what all the syllables are and then go through it and then do it until I can do it without having to, sort of fish around for re, do, and so that there wasn't a bunch of beating, a bunch of adjustments that I had to make, and then go on to the next thing. And then I found that I can learn music much faster because I'm not sort of guessing with my physical setup on the horn as far as where I'm going, so that so I'm sort of diving right into music, knowing what it's supposed to sound like.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have anything about this that doesn't make sense or anything like that, or does it kind of?
Okay, so this note is T, but if it's written C flat, it's do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and that's more of a, and that's where it's never going to make you have perfect, exact pitch or anything like that. But, yeah, I mean, I just figured rather than having to decide, well, if these ones are, if this is B and if it's B sharp, rather than calling that do because it's actually a C, I'd rather just look at whatever note it is, and no matter what note, or no matter what the absolute pitch is, if it's written a B, it'll be T.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, it's kind of nice actually that you guys do, if you're going to do this, that you guys do numbers, so this won't be clashing with that in terms of, you won't have to then go and sing in F and have F be do like I had to do in undergrad. But do you want to try going through a little bit more of this?
Sure.
Just for practice.
Yeah.
We can just keep going from where we are.
Right.
So that's. was great for just learning solfege just the second. So, so I mean, it doesn't take long before it becomes kind of automatic. It ends up being pretty useful pretty quickly. And that's great. And I mean, it's a little helpful that you've worked on this enough where you have it in your ear. But I mean, you can tell. I mean, it doesn't take long before you go re mi la. You see, I hit it too hard. La fa re do re mi la fa re do. It doesn't take a lot of repetitions to get that in your head, and that means that you don't have to. You don't have things where you're playing the tuba and you just get used to playing your E flats real flat or real sharp or something like that. You know, I had to work with Lawrence a little bit, and he just had gotten in his head that the E flats in one part of the Haddad suite were higher than they are, so he had to kind of readjust to sitting down lower on that note. And when you're actually checking in with something with pretty good pitch like a piano, that really helps intonation because, as I mentioned, I went from not having any ability to tell what I was doing to being pretty good at it after.
Yeah, my D and Fs are kind of wonky on my
Yeah.
6. D's like all the way in, and F is like
and F is out
slide
now,
all
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I deal with that too. And that's, I mean, those two are still some of the notes that I find myself having to recheck in. I always want to play Fs higher than they are because they feel better that way on the horn.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so that, any other questions, or is that kind of, and eventually you'll get to the point where you can kind of do it in tempo and where you don't have to check with the piano as much because you know what it is, but it's always good to get back on.
Right.
And if you, I mean, DZ doesn't have us buzz very much, but one thing that can also be helpful if you're doing something particularly with a lot of lip slurs in it is to sing it first and then buzz, also checking your pitch, and then take it to the horn. All right. Cool. That's kind of what I have to say about that. But
that is a lot of help.
yeah, I hope it. I mean, you know, if it doesn't end up working for you, that's cool. But I think it was really helpful for me.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.